All right, so we'll get straight in. This presentation tonight is going to be recorded, so for those of you that want to go back and re-watch anything at all, it'll be uploaded onto the members portal, and that can always be accessed at any point. So today's presentation, in the spirit of December, this time of year, we're going to be discussing managing eating around Christmas, and it'll more so be around, a few different strategies around some maybe more challenging components of this time of year and how to enjoy a bit more of a balanced holiday season while staying on track with your goals. And for those of you who haven't met me at the clinic or who haven't come to any presentations I've put on before, my name is Sarah and I'm one of the dietitians at Olivia. All right, so before we start, I just wanted to put up a little reminder here, just to mention that the holiday season is mostly, I know hopefully, about joy, about connection, and about rest. So I really do encourage all of you to put a lot of focus on enjoying time with loved ones rather than putting too much pressure on yourself or stressing too much about your food intake or your weight throughout this time. And a good sort of mindset shift that can be helpful this time of year is changing your goals if they are currently, for weight loss, aiming for weight maintenance throughout this period. And also remembering as well that small fluctuations are totally and completely normal. I think that's something particularly around sort of Christmas, New Year time. If we're eating a little bit differently, if we're out of routine and we jump on the scales, we see changes and it can freak us out a little bit, or cause, feelings of disheartened. But yeah, knowing that it's totally normal and something just to sort of, be mindful of. And also wanted to note that everything that we discuss in this presentation today are just suggestions to help you manage the festive season a little bit better. So nothing that you have to take as gospel. I want you to sort of be able to pick and choose a few things that might work for you and implement those strategies, if they can help you achieve a good balance this Christmas and New Year period. Okay, so to start, just be sort of looking at, some of the challenges that we might face around this time of year. So Christmas particularly can be a really challenging time, when you're working towards your weight management goals. But I did want to start by normalizing that experience. A lot of people do feel a bit of extra pressure this time of year. There are a lot more social events on. There's a lot more food around, particularly food that might not be available other times of the year. Often less routine and possibly more, stronger emotions attached to eating as well. So because of all these factors, it is very common to have concerns about losing control or undoing progress or feeling judged for the choices that you're making. So with all this in mind, it is really important to remember that Christmas isn't a failure point. It's simply part of life. It's something that comes around every year, something that if we can learn to manage and feel confident, makes it, much easier moving forward. And our goals, particularly around this time, isn't perfection. It's more learning how to navigate periods like this in a way that supports both your physical health and your mental well-being as well. So we're going to be focusing on some practical, realistic strategies that can help you enjoy the festive season, but also while staying aligned with your goals. And noting that it's about progress, flexibility, and confidence, and it's not at all about restriction or guilt. So our first strategy today is choosing your events wisely. So one of the biggest challenges at Christmas is that there are often lots and lots of events on, all in close proximity to each other. And it can start to feel like every occasion might be becoming a bit of a free-for-all. And then when everything turns into an indulgence, it is really easy to feel out of control or feel sort of negative emotions, whether it's disappointment or guilt after these events, or these periods where there's multiple events. So instead, I'd really encourage you to be perhaps a bit more selective and intentional around these events and occasions. So it can be good to take a moment and think about the events that genuinely matter to you, ones that are going to bring you most joy, or ones that maybe you've been looking forward to for a long time. So that might be Christmas Day with family, it could be a special dinner with close friends, or it could be a work function that you've been looking forward to. So, giving yourself permission to enjoy one or two of these events a bit more freely and without guilt can be really, really helpful heading into them. And for the remaining gatherings, so if you do have, a few you're really excited for, but there's a few others that, maybe you can sort of, be a little bit more mindful. Um, Try and aim to stick a little bit closer to your usual habits. So this approach really helps reduce overwhelm and supports a greater sense of control. So when our indulgence is planned, it's often more enjoyable and far less likely to spiral out of control. And another thing to note is that, again, if there are any sort of associations of, guilt or negative emotions around events, just reminding yourself that one celebration isn't going to undo months and months of consistent effort and hard work. So it's just a blip in time, and sort of being able to acknowledge that and move on can be really helpful as well. The second strategy is to plan your limits ahead. So even at your chosen enjoyment events, having some structure in place can make a big difference. Because when we go in with no plan at all, it can be really easy to eat or drink past the point of enjoyment, which can feel uncomfortable both physically and emotionally as well. So before we head into an event, it can be really helpful to ask yourself, what would feeling satisfied but not overly full look like for me? And that's where we can look at some reasonable limits to set. So it might mean deciding on a drink limit for yourself. It could be choosing to share a dessert rather than having a full dessert to yourself. Or it could just be committing to one plate if you know you're going to be around buffet style meals or food. And as I mentioned, these limits aren't about restriction, but rather they're about protecting how you want to feel later, both during the event and after the event as well. So setting these boundaries can also remove decision making in the moment when willpower is often at its lowest. And it also allows you to enjoy what you want to choose more fully because you're doing it intentionally rather than reactively. So it can be good to, maybe have a think about what some of these limits could look like for you. If there's events that you go to, family traditions or events that are on every year, and knowing maybe what you've struggled with in the past and trying to put in place some limits or strategies around those particular events. Our third strategy could be opting to be the designated driver. So, alcohol is one of the most underestimated challenges at Christmas. We know it's quite calorie dense, it's very easy to overconsume, and it can significantly lower our inhibitions around food choices as well. And I think most of us would have experienced this at some point. If we have a few drinks, we sort of let the reins go a little bit and we have that, oh, well, sort of mentality. So if that's something that you struggle with, choosing to be a designated driver or limit your alcohol intake can be a good strategy for you. So if you do volunteer to be the designated driver, it removes the decision entirely and also gives you a really clear boundary, which might become, quite freeing, knowing that you don't have to sort of tackle awkward conversations or umming and ahhing if people are sort of, edging you on to have a drink. And it also comes with added benefits. Like it might mean saving money and also ensuring that other people do get home safely as well. If you do choose to drink, it can also be helpful to, again, decide your limit before you arrive and aim to stick with that throughout the night. Another thing, if you're drinking, alternating alcoholic drinks with water can really help slow things down and obviously support your hydration there as well. And having this goal, so, it's not necessarily about avoiding alcohol altogether, unless that is what you choose to do. But it's more about making those intentional choices that align with your goals. Like I said, if alcohol is something that, maybe you have a hard time with, or, your inhibitions sort of lose them a little bit, this can be really helpful. So, our fourth strategy is not to abandon the scales entirely. So many people might choose to completely avoid the scales during Christmas, and often this could be out of fear or just a desire to enjoy the break. And that reaction is very understandable, but total avoidance can actually sometimes make things a little bit harder when we're looking at it in the long run. So, regular check ins, if we aim to do this maybe every 3 to 5 days, or it could even be once a week if that feels a little bit more appropriate for you. But these regular check ins can help you stay aware without becoming obsessive over your weight. And the purpose of weighing yourself isn't to judge yourself, and it's not to sort of react to every small fluctuation that you see. It's simply one piece of information that can help guide your choices moving forward. Because if you are stepping on the scales and that you do notice that your weight is trending up slightly, it actually then gives you the opportunity to make some small adjustments earlier on rather than facing bigger surprises later on down the track. And I think that's often the case as well. If we are eating in more of a structured way, if we're having regular meals, eating similar foods, this time of year, there does tend to be a bit more sugar or some more carbohydrate heavy foods or more salty foods. And carbs and sodium are both sort of food components that are going to cause more water retention. So if we've increased our intake of our carbs and sodium, step on the scales, there is going to be an increase. But just reminding yourself that it doesn't mean it's an increase in body fat, knowing that they are just regular fluctuations. And if you give yourself a few days and jump back on, that's going to be much more reflective of your like a more accurate body weight. So our fifth strategy is to try and focus on and enjoy the non-food aspects of Christmas. So we've already talked about food a bit, and it is really easy for food to become the center of Christmas, but we know that it is only one part of this whole experience. And if we intentionally shift our focus, food will then naturally take up a little bit less space. So, what Christmas is really about, connection. So, spending quality time with people you care about, having meaningful conversations, creating memories with family. It's also a really good time to rest and recover. So, giving yourself permission to slow down after a busy year. Hopefully, you will get some time off to be able to do that. And it can also be about giving. So, acts of kindness, generosity, gratitude. And if we can focus on these elements, eating often becomes a little bit more mindful and less emotionally driven because it's not the sole focus throughout this time. So now we'll just be honing in a little bit more on some other components regarding our liquid calories, our food intake, and exercise as well. So starting with managing our liquid calories. So our liquid calories can add up very, very quickly without us feeling physically full, which is what makes them so easy to overconsume. And when we're talking about liquid calories, maybe our mind first goes to alcohol, but that also includes other beverages such as soft drinks, juices, coffees. These can all be common contributors during the festive season. So to make better choices, choosing some lower calorie or lower sugar options can be really good to sort of keep in mind. So options here would be things like water, sparkling or mineral water, tea, coffee, and having these as your primary fluids can help reduce unnecessary calorie intake. Also, our diet or sugar-free, soft drinks can also be really helpful when they do replace more sugary options as well. And if you do choose alcohol, options like light beer or spirits with sugar-free mixes can also be better choices. And as we touched on before, sort of pacing yourself and alternating alcohol with water can really help reduce overconsumption as well. So on the next slide, we will look at different examples of the calorie content of our alcoholic drinks. So starting on the left-hand side, we've got our spirits, so vodka, whiskey, gin, all sit around the sort of 60 calorie mark roughly for a 30 ml shot. Now, as a spirit on its own, quite a good drink choice in terms of a low calorie drink choice. And if we're mixing it with things like sugar-free mixes, so soda water, sugar-free soft drinks, then generally speaking, they are going to be a good low-calorie choice. It's more that when we start to mix them with our high sugar or high calorie mixes, so things like juices, soft drinks, things like that, tonic even is quite high in sugar. That's where it can sort of add up and become, a little bit more of a high calorie drink. Next, we've got our wines. So for the most part, sparkling white and red wine are all going to be sitting around the same calorie content for a 100 ml serve. And 100 mils of wine is the standard drink in Australia, the measurement for a standard drink in Australia. So also something important to keep in mind, because I think if we are going out to restaurants or if we're pouring these drinks ourselves, I don't think many of us are going to be measuring out 100 mils, let alone free pouring 100 mils. So it often ends up being 1.5, maybe even, two standard drinks or more in a glass. So if you are, driving and need to manage your standard drinks, obviously very important to keep this in mind. But again, with the calorie content, we can see how easily that can add up if we are doing larger pours. And then for the right-hand side to compare our beers, so we've got full strength beer. For a 330 ml bottle, we're looking at about 122 calories. But for a light beer, we get a larger volume at 375 ml for lower calories at 90 per bottle. So any sort of light beer or low carb beer as well are both going to be really good options. You get more volume, more liquid for a lower calorie content. And particularly if you're someone that does enjoy beer and does like to have a few, that's going to be a much better option there. And then lastly, we've got our apple cider. So quite a high sugar beverage. We're looking at sort of 200 calories roughly in a 330 ml bottle. So this is just good to see as a bit of a snapshot, a bit of an overview for some very common alcoholic drinks, and maybe it might help you make some more informed choices. So if you are someone that loves a full strength beer, maybe it is alternating with a lower calorie drink, or again, that's where your water can come in really handy just to sort of spread your drinks out across the evening and pace yourself a little bit more. And these as well, these are all sort of estimates, averages. When you're looking at different brands, all of these numbers are likely going to vary as well. So just keeping that in mind too. All right, so our smart food choices at social gatherings. There's a few simple, practical strategies that can really help you feel more in control at social events. So the first thing can be considering what you do before you arrive at the event. First thing is wanting to maintain your regular eating patterns, maintaining your same routine before you arrive. We don't want to be, skipping meals in the lead up to a big dinner or a big night out. That's just going to end up sort of leaving you feeling hungrier and maybe then eating more than you would have if you just kept your regular routine in place. And if you do find that, maybe it's been a few hours since you've had your last meal and before you're going to get to eat again at the event, it can be helpful to eat a small protein-rich snack before you leave. And this can also help prevent arriving feeling overly hungry, which, as I mentioned, often leads to overeating. Once you arrive, it can be really helpful to take time to survey all the options that you have available before filling your plate. I think if we go somewhere that's got an amazing spread of food and there's lots of different things that look appealing and tempting and that you want to try, there's no reason that you can't try a bit of everything, but sort of being able to assess everything and portion your plate a bit more mindfully can help as well. So ideally, we'd want to be keeping in mind the plate method here. So similar representation is in the picture on this slide here, with aiming for that half a plate of vegetables or salad, quarter of a plate of a lean protein, and a quarter of a plate of carbohydrates. So this simple method is really helpful for creating balance without feeling the need to be sort of measuring or tracking your intake or anything like that. And then another tip, and this again, when we are around an abundance of food, it can be very tempting to be sort of grazing and eating consistently. So we'd want to be plating our food and then positioning ourselves away from the food table. So this small change can really help reduce that sort of mindless grazing and overeating across the span of the day. And if you do feel like seconds, absolutely fine. I think sort of keep those same strategies in place, being mindful, using the plate strategy to sort of help, build that balance. All right, next is handling our social pressure. So I think social pressure can be one of the hardest parts about navigating Christmas. Family and friends are usually quite well-meaning, but might make comments to you like, oh, just have one more, or, it's Christmas, it doesn't matter. And this might make it difficult for you to stick to your intentions. And, if you've set limits or set goals for yourself for the evening, these comments can, make it really hard. You might feel a bit of extra pressure or obliged to sort of give in to what they're offering. So something you can do here is having a few prepared responses ready to go. And this can help make managing these situations a little bit easier. So you don't have to be, rude at all. It can just be simple, polite statements saying things such as, I'm full, thank you, or I'm being mindful of my health goals. I'll save room for dessert. All of these sort of statements are completely valid. And I think remembering as well, you don't owe anyone an explanation for your choices, but sometimes in theory, this might sound like a good idea, but when in the situation, it might be a little bit harder to execute. So it could be good to try practicing these responses ahead of time, just at home, just to get a little bit more comfortable and confident in saying them. And, in that moment, then if this happens, you might feel a little bit less caught off guard. So next, we'll just be talking across a couple of slides about staying active during the holidays. So physical activity during the holidays is really important for supporting obviously your physical health, but also your mental health. And the goal here isn't to do more than usual. Ideally, it would be just to simply maintain some level of consistency. So even if that looks like reducing your usual routine or usual exercise by half, it's still going to provide you with some really good benefits. Um, Even if that, the usual routine or half of it feels a little bit unrealistic for you, if you've, got kids home from holidays or you've got a lot on, it can be a good idea maybe to try incorporating alternative types of movement instead. So it doesn't even need to be quote unquote exercise per se. It might be finding other ways to get your body moving. So it might be, going for a walk after eating a meal or playing in the park with the family. It could be dancing at home or at parties. It could be shopping in store rather than online. Or even just finding ways that you can increase your incidental movement throughout the day. So parking further away from the shops or taking the stairs or taking the stairs instead of the elevators, ideally. And then the second part here is actually looking at finding the time. So, as I said, depending on what your Christmas period looks like, finding time to get that exercise in as usual can feel like a challenge in and itself. So, if we can find a way to schedule it into your day, might help make it feel a little bit more achievable for you. So some simple strategies might be aiming to include exercise earlier in the day to get it over and done with, particularly if you find, come the afternoon or the evening, you're a lot less motivated. So it's eating the frog and doing that first. Or even just adapting your usual routine, maybe into shorter but slightly more intensive sessions. So if you, go for walks, if you go for runs, if you go to the gym, go for swims, maybe putting in a little bit more intensity into those workouts, but cutting them short by, 10, 15 minutes even. And also worth remembering that exercise is going to support far more than your calorie balance throughout this time. It is really important for our sleep quality, for stress management, for emotional regulation, and all of these things, I'm sure we're aware are quite important during the festive season. All right, so getting back on track after Christmas. And if you found throughout this Christmas period, you've set some limits or set some goals or targets for yourself, but maybe haven't been able to follow through with many of them or any of them. I think reminding yourself that it's completely normal to have moments where things don't go as planned. We can have the best intentions, but maybe they just don't work out as we would have liked. And what really matters isn't the slip in itself, but it's how you actually respond to that afterwards. So we really want to try and avoid any sort of, punishment, any sort of guilt, any extreme restriction, sorry, because these reactions can often backfire. So instead, we'd want to aim to return to your normal habits at the very next meal or the following day, rather than sending yourself into a bit of a spiral or that snowball effect where we're like, oh, well, I've really done it now, bugger it. And then you just sort of, keep making poor choices. And knowing as well that there's no need for you to, I think we have the notion of, oh, I'll start again Monday or I'll start again on January 1st, but we don't need to wait for Monday or next week or New Year's Day. Being able to see every moment as an opportunity to reset can be really helpful too. So yeah, second part of here is doing a bit of self-reflection. So self-reflection can be a really, really powerful learning tool, and asking yourself some questions depending on how your planned intentions worked out for you. So if something, didn't go right, it can be good to ask yourself, well, what triggered that? What, did I intend to do that maybe didn't plan out as I would have liked? What would you do differently next time? But also if there were things that did go as planned, sort of reviewing and revising what went well about those as well. So if it's something that, worked in your favor, maybe it's a strategy that you want to keep in your back pocket and be able to use time and time again in similar situations. And if you do find that, yeah, you've sort of are struggling getting back on track or feeling like you're in a bit of a rut, it can be really helpful to get in touch with your Allevia doctor or dietitian. And even if it's not sort of healthcare professional, maybe it's reaching out to community. So it could be the Allevia Facebook group, it could be a, exercise group, it could be, your friends and family even. But just trying to, avoid isolating yourself and, yeah, avoiding accountability, just sort of being able to talk through that and, yeah, get back on track as soon as you can. All right. And so we've got a summary of our main strategies here. So just to go through those again as a bit of a refresher. Aiming to choose a few meaningful events to attend, and then nominating, one or two of those events as ones to enjoy a bit more freely, the other ones sort of trying to keep your usual routine in place. Planning specific limits ahead of time, considering being the designated driver if it's suitable for you to do. Keeping those sort of regular weight check-ins, as I said, every 3 to 5 days or even once a week. Focusing on our non-food joys of the season, keeping your why front of mind to keep your motivation quite strong, being mindful of those liquid calories and maybe, going through and, seeing sort of what sort of substitutes you can make or swaps you can make for some better choices there. Using the plate strategy for balance when it comes to our food intake, preparing responses for social pressure, maintaining some level of physical activity, even if it's, not what you would love to do or if it's not reflective of your normal routine. And then resuming those normal habits immediately after any slip to avoid any sort of prolonged spiraling. And then finally, just sort of noting that, all of those strategies are, really about balance, about awareness, about self-compassion, and sort of doing that planning ahead and staying connected to your goals, allowing that flexibility can really help you enjoy Christmas without losing your momentum entirely. Yeah, that's everything, I believe.